Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So we introduced the idea of enlightenment and the this change takes place in the 18th century in class, and we're asking you guys to look at the idea of philosophs on your own a little bit. So uh, the enlightened individual we're going to talk about was called a philosophe. Think about philosopher, right? But we're short enough, make it more French. Um, and think about philosophers of his time, and it's kind of interesting. Our way to look at them is that they aren't super original, right? These guys, I mean, the idea has been around for a long time. We're taking in the Enlightenment the process of the scientific revolution, the ideas of empiricism, um, empirical thinking, all kind of ideas, inductive reasoning, and we're applying it to social problems. Is the essence of what we're trying to do here. These guys aren't super original. What they are really good at is ways of being publicists and to promote their new way of thinking, and they're doing it for change and progress. Guys like Bacon, guys like Descartes, they wrote a lot of stuff about science for science's sake. These guys here, and women for that matter, are trying to find change and progress. These people, if you want to look at the idea of changing stuff, right? They're looking at society and trying to figure out what's wrong with it, right? And how can we reform the problems that are going down? So essentially, the great debate we're going to see in terms of the Enlightenment and the philosophers are between two great ideas and changing ideas. You have the old European way of tradition and superstition, okay? The way the past always was, and religion and irrational belief and living by emotion, okay? Superstition being the biggest part of it. Well, you know, we're in bad weather. God must be mad. You know what I mean? Or, hey, this devastating thing happens. We did something wrong. Versus reason and logic, being rational, thinking things through. Why did this happen? Trying to find a more real life reason for it. Empiricism, looking at experimentation and analyzing different parts of stuff being broken down. Tolerance, the idea of accepting other people's beliefs, other people's religion. Skepticism, being a skeptic. Questioning the superstitions that are there. And we'll talk about deism as well. Deism, we talk about in class, essentially being a religious style belief that says that, maybe God isn't involved in every little thing. Maybe God's more involved in, kind of getting stuff going. And then we have a big part of keeping things going from there, which we'll explain more as we go on forward here. So we're going to introduce you to some different philosophers, okay, in this little video lecture here. Our first name is Marquis de Condorcet, Progress of the Human Mind. Essentially writing this whole document about how we should be able to achieve a universal happiness, that everyone in some way, shape, or form can be happy. If we follow true reason, we make our decisions based on reason, based on thinking out what the best options will be, trying to find why things happen the way they happen, versus just kind of go by skepticism or go by what the religion tells us to do. We live a true, free independence. So he said we have to have equal education for all people. Obviously, before this, only the rich are being educated. He says we have to everyone have education. He calls for a constitution, ending the idea of absolute monarchies, and for equal rights of women, that we can't have this big split between men and women. Obviously, very, very big changes for the time. We talked about John Locke earlier, John Locke being one of our earliest philosophers, and we talked about his different letters he writes. And we focused on two treatises of government earlier, but he writes a lot of other things too, including a letter on toleration. He talks about education and Christianity. You're going to see a theme here, ladies and gentlemen, okay? And he talks about becoming a rational creature. That word rational comes out again. Is that essentially using common sense and trying to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. And that, the idea of virtue or being a good person can be learned and practiced. We have this thing called tabula rasa. We are a blank slate, and we can learn how to be good people. And we have this free will, you know what I mean? That we have free will to choose how we're going to do things. And he looked at the idea of government, especially growing up and him writing during the English Civil War, and the English Civil War, as well as the Glorious Revolution happens later on. He says we have a free will of people, right? And that we should, prepare people for freedom, and it should not be, we shouldn't be doing obedience out of fear. The idea that we should be able to make decisions as people, and that's when we make our decisions based off of the fear of physical violence, or the fear of taxes, or the fear of what may be coming from us. You know what I mean? We talked already about the social contract that we have to make with people. That we say, yes, you have power to rule us, but at the same time, we agree to be ruled by you. And that contract, we have to make sure rules stays well, and we follow the rules of what government is, and that kings and wealth is not an issue in questioning of you get the stuff because you're a good person, or you're a godly person. It's because you did rational thinking. He kind of fights a little bit against Christianity, or especially Calvinism, saying, well, I'm doing well because I'm a good Christian. No, you're doing well because you think things through. Essentially what is he's saying, versus kind of the foregoing beliefs of why you're king or why you're rich. We're talking about the three obviously rights: life, liberty, property. So make sure you guys know those. Big thing with these natural rights that God gives to all people, right? And he was really, really far against divine right of kings. He wanted to have a republican style government versus anything else. And he was our major English philosopher this time. He's one of our first big philosophers as well. We do see Immanuel Kant as well. He's a German guy, a Prussian, who writes a couple different books, things like Critique of Pure Reason, What is Enlightenment, and the Metaphysical Foundation of Natural Science. And he's kind of a cool guy in that. We're going to read part of What is Enlightenment in our class, by the way. But he said, did or no. He goes, you should try and figure out all the things you can figure out. Don't just accept anything as being the way it is. Try to find out way things are. And in a way, he's actually our first ever, for me, transcendentalist. So transcendental being the idea of trying to simplify things, right? And trying to look at ideas and try to discover ideas. He said, essentially, empiricism isn't everything. Where Francis Bacon said you have to have empiricism, he's like, maybe you can find a non-rational way. Where I was talking reason, he's saying, we can find other ways to figure stuff out. He says we can find things a priori. Essentially means like find it through a way that's not scientific, and we can learn things that are not scientific. We study ideas of faith, of death, that we can learn about things just by thinking about them, by discussing, by talking about them. And not every single thing has to be an experiment, which is kind of a revolutionary thing, too, in terms of even the Enlightenment movement itself. One of the biggest names you'll have to know about the Enlightenment is Voltaire. Voltaire is one of the main French writers. Now, Voltaire was his pen name. Okay, man's name was actual Francois-Marie Arouet, who he wrote under the name Voltaire because when he was writing, you really can't publish this stuff under your own name. The government would be on you and take you down. So he wrote about Customs and Spirit Nations. He wrote a book called Candide, which is a great satirical novel, essentially talking about how not everything can be perfect and happy, that there are times where disasters happen. And it's not because of divine intervention or anything. It's more or less because disasters are real and you have to deal with them. He talked a lot about 7 Years' War and about the Great Lisbon earthquake that takes place. And all those different topics that he has that he kind of brings in to talk about how, there's a real idea to things. Voltaire is a very interesting writer, and we'll read a little bit from Voltaire. But he had a lot of very political views. Now, he was a French guy, but he actually lives in England for quite a while. He actually had to escape some stuff in France. He believes in a lot of things he sees in England that's not happening in France, right? France did not have freedom of the press. France did not have toleration, right? He looked at England and said, hey, England has a lot of these kind of things here, you know what I mean? But, parliament is not a good thing. That if having a parliament is not for everybody. He wants to see an enlightened monarch. We're talking enlightened monarchs later on, kind of his inspiration and stuff. He was saying, if we have kings and stuff, maybe they shouldn't be chosen by way of, heredity, but by way of education. And in a way, almost kind of having like almost a Hobbesian type deal, saying, maybe a better person can rule us and do really good things. One of the things that Voltaire talked a lot about was the hatred of the church. He said, if this God guy is so great, why do people keep dying? You know what I mean? He basically broke religion down and said religion is nothing more than a crazy cult. It offers people hope, it keeps them in line, keeps them behaving. You know what I mean? And he says, it's not really, a good thing. It's just a way of controlling people is what it is. And that's what his book Candide is all about. He talks about how this guy lives in this great Garden of Eden in the book Candide. And then the guy leaves his great garden and starts seeing all these terrible, terrible things that happen around the world and saying, well, if God is so great and so good, why are people getting hurt? And so he says the church is just a way of controlling people. That's what he essentially starts talking about. And he calls for a lot of religious tolerance instead. So saying you believe one thing or believe the church, believe whatever. He also talks about revolution, in terms of how having a revolution in France especially is an inevitable thing and is going to happen. Here's a little quotes of Voltaire. I love talking about these ideas, kind of things like, every man is guilty of all the good he didn't do. The idea of you can only be as good a person as stuff you do, not you're not a good person because, look at Calvinism, because you're predestined, that kind of stuff. God is a comedian playing to an audience too afraid to laugh. Ooh, deep stuff, right? I mean, the idea that, the idea of controlling through religion, right? If God did not exist, it would not be necessary to invent him. All those kind of things. Talk about, how it's dangerous to be right when the government is wrong. That, when you, argue against the government, those kind of deals. His biggest thing here is the idea about tolerance. So about equality of men, not birth, but virtue making the difference. The idea of prejudice and freedom of speech is a big part of it. And really we love about freedom of speech a lot when we get to Voltaire. My favorite quote from him is this saying, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I would defend to death your right to say it. He's finding a lot of things he's seeing in his home country of France that are not existing there. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and really fighting against those ideas. He did a lot of writing too with Newton's work, those kind of things. His lover, his mistress, actually probably smarter than he was, Emily de Duchâtelet, who he was with as his mistress, as his lover, but at the same time, he also helped her, publish her work, even though she really couldn't publish it underneath her own name, where she's writing to explain all of Newton's work, and he's trying to explain, God and that kind of stuff. It's interesting to look at how these two people kind of worked in this whole idea here. David Hume was a Scottish guy. He's a Scot who did a lot of things too, in terms of, kind of echoing Voltaire in terms that, the idea we have a religion was more about fear and superstition than reason. That, we only, had religion because we need it to keep us in line. And it's all about superstition, almost like a culty type thing versus anything else. Edward Gibbon's a Brit, and it's kind of funny. You actually see historians developing out of this time too. What Edward Gibbon does, he writes this 6-volume set called The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Essentially saying how, hey, look, here's Rome. Rome fell apart. Reasonably, we can assume that our own country will do the same thing too. So he's taking all the contemporary problems England was having in the 18th century and said, look, guys, here's what happened to Rome. Here's what could happen to us. Let's not make the same exact mistakes Rome did. We'll see if they do later on or not, if he's right. And he really wanted England to reform and fix their problems so they don't fall apart like Rome did so long ago. One of my favorite people in all of the Enlightenment, I mean, honestly, think even my favorite, is the Baron de Montesquieu. And the Baron de Montesquieu is also a pen name, okay? Underneath his pen name, the Baron wrote Persian Letters in 1721 and Unspirited Laws. A lot of his books are satire, okay? They're kind of hiding some of the arguments here. Voltaire, Candide is written in satire about this story. And on the cover, it's a story, right? On the other side is actually more of a political satire, looking at and critiquing society. Persian Letters is my favorite example of this, okay? Persian Letters is a story about visiting France from it's sort of about touring through France as a visiting Persian emissary. And essentially, he's talking as this Persian guy from, modern day Iraq, essentially, and making fun of how French act and how French government is, and the monarchy and the nobles and the estates general, all those kind of things are there. And he writes it, his real name, Charles Louis, just like that. But, he really, was a big part. He was a landed noble, a lawman, that kind of stuff, right? But he looks at all the bad things people do, right? The idea of prejudice and standard justice for all people. And he fought a lot against slavery. Oh, my gosh. He was the guy who wrote against slavery. He also talked about the way government works. Now, whereas, guys like Voltaire were about enlightened monarchs and not maybe about parliaments, in Spirited Laws, the Baron Montesquieu writes all about how we have to have parliaments. He absolutely loved, love the British parliamentary system, where he basically says that the only way for government to actually work is to limit all their powers. And that's where we get our modern day types of government, right? There's ideas of monarchy, republic, despotism. So kings, you have the idea of lawmaking bodies, you have the idea of an emperor type deal. And he says that separation of political power is the only way to make sure that one person doesn't become a despot, right? Doesn't matter what kind of government you're in. It could be a monarchy, could be a republic, could be whatever. You're going to have a despot, or you're going to have an emperor or one leader, totalitarian type guy, if you don't limit power. So this is where we see kind of comes in the United States, where we have the idea of legislative, executive, judicial, 3 different branches, and splitting that power up to make sure that no one group gets too corrupt. Jean-Jacques Rousseau is honestly kind of a rock star of the Enlightenment. I mean, he writes a lot about discourse of science and arts, and his education treatise is Emile, which is about a young Prussian boy who's in school and kind of critiquing our education system. And the most famous book by far is called The Social Contract, though, printed in 1762. And so we answer this question, right? Does progress of science and art also add to morality? That's the kind of question. Yeah, he goes, we're doing all this science, all this art stuff, right? But are we becoming a more moral society? And his argument was that essentially we are more moral in our more natural state. And essentially, as we have more science and more arts, we have corrupted our morals and become worse acting people and not improve upon those morals. And as we develop new ideas, new things, we want more technology, we want more money, all that kind of stuff, and we become a less moral people because we're hiding behind science and art and all those kind of things. If we want to be more a simple lifestyle, we'd be a more moral type of people. So he says, nope, we are not more moral. This guy who does this, he really focuses on emotion and instinct and kind of how we are in our most natural state. This guy was very different. I mean, he was very weird. He essentially was in Geneva all the time, either prosperous than anything else. A lot of our Enlightenment guys, we talk about against religion, but still remain religious. Kind of a loner type guy. Like a lot of he goes to England, very, very quarrelsome about stuff, and he's got a very interesting background, right? But I said that primitive good is where he, believes it, right? Our new civilization has made mankind worse. And also, like a lot of other republics, he says, republic is the best kind of government we have. The real true virtue we have, right? Total the idea is lost in our society, and governments are keep that. One of the coolest concepts he comes up with is the idea of called with a noble savage, right? Man is born free. Okay, we're born, we are a free person, but at the same time, we are held in bondage. We are held in custody by the idea of society, of what you have to do, what you have to be. The idea of being rich or being powerful, all that kind of stuff. He calls ourselves a noble savage. We are born free, yet everywhere we are in chains. And we have a truly great society. We have liberty, equality, fraternity. We have all our rights and liberties in one society. This guy would inspire essentially parts of the French Revolution, especially the most violent and radical parts of the French Revolution we by him. Because we have a social contract that if we're all good moral people, right, and we have a good morality, we're going to keep achieving things, right? Our own interests, right, and our own interests will then help us to do the general will. And we essentially want to make sure we learn one's interests. If we protect each other's general will, all that kind of stuff, we protect everybody else's ideas. We kind of attribute to having the great general society that's going to be better than if we had anything else before that. It's not necessarily like Locke's contract. Locke's contract said, yeah, rulers are going to take care of you. You're going to obey your rulers, vice versa. Rousseau said we have a contract with each other. Okay, so we're going to respect each other. We're going to work with each other, make sure all our rights are taken care of. But it's not about rulers and that kind of stuff. If we all work together, respect each other's general will, respect each other's rights, we're going to have a much better, much more moral society. It's not biblical, it's not historical, but it is an idea that he has in terms of his social contract. Like I said, he was like a lot of people big into republics, and the idea is that if people aren't following social contract, then we could, free ourselves from that. And we could, there's really no protection for rights. We're going to take care of each other's rights. And so he inspires a lot of things as far as Marx. He inspires a lot of things as far as French Revolution that are going to happen later on. I'm going to stop there for part 1 of this, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to save this. We'll post it. And check out part 2. It's going to come right along with this, looking at how we popularize the Enlightenment.